Nice to have you, Trudy. Been a while.
Thank you.
On
Thank
on
you, Raghu.
yeah, on Mindrolling. So first of all, anybody I talk to, you inevitably talk about what is going on in our world. Pandemic, politics, polarization, racial injustice, and the whole thing. And actually, you haven't seen this, but we have just released the retreat that we did 1 year ago, Ram Dass's last retreat in Maui, that you were at teaching, and a wonderful little trailer was made, because the bundle, it's one of the ways, because everything we do is for free from Love Serve Remember Foundation. But when we actually prepare and put up downloads, people can purchase them so they can use them anytime they want. And
I saw the clip.
You did see the clip.
I saw the clip. Yeah, it's beautiful.
But I particularly loved what you said about becoming nobody. Now, wait a minute on becoming nobody, okay? Because it was kind of that, right? Do you just talk about it for a second? Because it's so relevant. People misunderstanding basically what Ram Dass was talking about. And there's a bigger picture, right?
Well, there's a bigger picture, and it's the nobody with a capital N. The nobody that is free from attachments, and at least in that moment, free from ego concerns. And by ego, I just mean things that we might consider, maybe selfish isn't the right word, but concerns about ourselves. And usually we're looking pretty much at everything through that lens of, will it help me? Will it hurt me? Is it going to enhance me? Is it going to threaten me?
Selfish is kind of true.
And it's like looking at the sky through a straw, and just thinking that little circle, that's it, that's the sky. And the beauty of being with Ram Dass is that without having to spend weeks and weeks and months in doing intensive practice, which is a beautiful thing to do, but it's not available to everybody. You need support to be able to do that. And that in his presence, that little circle would widen and widen and widen. And his consciousness was so big. And Ram Dass wasn't nobody. Ram Dass was somebody, and somebody in the world, and somebody with a personality, and somebody that, I'm going to tell stories about his humanness, and as well as his divine heart. But so what does it mean to be nobody? It means being able to hold all that so lightly, and to be able to do the things that we need to do to support our work in the world. And increasingly, I think this is what I was talking about at the retreat too, increasingly that involves branding ourselves, developing social media presence and platforms, and, all the things that have to do with putting ourselves forward as somebody, and somebody unique and special. So it seems like a conflict, but actually we can hold both of these needs, the need to be somebody for our work in the world so that we can be recognizable in some way and relatable, and also the capacity to let that go, to let it fall away, and to open our hearts to that, that love and gigantic perspective that Ram Dass had. So
absolutely. Yeah.
And I think especially now when there's so much fear and so much anger and so much despair and all of this, so understandable, that the mental health, we're talking about getting sick and not wanting to get sick, but the mental health concerns are huge right now. And the ability to be both somebody and nobody is what I think we all want to, to find ways to balance in our emotional and spiritual and relational lives.
Yeah. As he used to say, we humans can live on more than one plane of consciousness at the same time. And that's exactly what you're talking about right now.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. And do you want me to launch into some stories, or do you want to ask me other questions, Raghu?
Well, I was going to start. No, we're just chatting. It doesn't matter. I was going to start with with an idea that not always, but you have said more than once. I was a Buddhist. I wasn't into Ram Dass. It was further down the line where I actually met him and started spending time with him. Then everything changed. So let's wind back to that and start there.
To wind back to the early days where I saw Ram Dass, he was around. He was at the McClelland House on Washington Street. I mean, it's not like I never saw him. But he was, to me, the embodiment of the love and light that at that time felt way too, I don't know, mushy, squishy, flowery. I was a Zen student, and Ram Dass was interesting and had great things to say. And it's not that I didn't respect him, but I wasn't drawn to him. That's true. And the idea of, singing and holding hands and dancing around him, it was not my thing. And so when I was supposed to teach with him. This was sometime maybe 2007, somewhere around there, when Sharon couldn't do the retreat that she would usually do with Ram Dass back then. Yes. And so I was invited to sub for her, and I was thrilled actually at the chance to teach with him and get to know him. But then something came up. It was actually an opportunity to do something with Jack. And there was 6 months notice. So I thought it wouldn't be too dishonorable to back out of the teaching with Ram Dass, which I did. And I did it. Looking back, I can't believe I did it, but I did it. And then 2 years later, I think it was, maybe 2 or 3 years, Jack and Wes Nisker, Jack Kornfield, Wes Nisker, brought me to visit Ram Dass. This is before Jack and I were together. We were just friends, but brought me to the house to visit. And I was really hoping that Ram Dass wouldn't remember my name. And when we met, he just gave me this look, and I was like, oh no, he completely remembers who I am, the person who canceled. So that was the beginning, but he was perfectly nice. But what happened we visited a couple times, and each time Jack and Wes had so much to say at the table, I really never got to say anything, and I didn't really have a sense of Ram Dass. And so I asked if I could have just 5 minutes alone with him after dinner, without the guys there. And we spent 5 minutes. I guess we just kind of stared at each other the way that he can beam out so much love. My heart just melted, and I got it. I was like, this is why everybody loves Ram Dass. He can tap into that vast channel, huge channel of love, and he has the capacity to radiate that in a way that is palpable and unmistakable. And, he loved to say that Maharaji was the fisherman, and we, the students, or if you're a disciple, were the fish, and that he was simply the bait on the hook.
The worm. He said the worm.
The worm. Yes, he did say the worm. Thank you. I wasn't going to say it. He did say the worm. I'm just the worm, he said. But that worm was so juicy, I was hooked. And so I actually started going and doing personal retreats in the little cottage right next to the house. And as you know, Ram Dass one of the super monkeys, was what I call the helpers in the household, because the monkey god, Hanuman, was a god of service, and they were really serving, along with Dasima, who ran the whole household. One of the super monkeys would wheel Ram Dass over to the cottage, and then we would spend, it was supposed to be an hour, but it would morph into 2 hours. He was so generous with his time. I would make him tea, and he would be so interested in anything that I wanted to say. At one point I was studying, trying to learn to play the piano, and I had this little keyboard, and he let me play my songs for him. He let me pour my heart out to him. This is what he did. And, many things, like everybody, I have so many memories and stories, but one of my favorite ones actually is I was pouring my heart out to him about my previous marriage and my divorce. It was very, very traumatic. Everybody's divorce is traumatic for them, but it was my divorce, so it was particularly traumatic for me. And I was going on and telling him about my husband and how we taught and we practiced together, and still what happened and how. And he listened and he listened. And then he looked at me. It was perfect, Raghu. He looked at me and he said, I'm more like George than you. In other words, my husband. And it just cut through, any sense of, I don't think I was telling it in a super self-righteous sense, but you can't help it. I was right, of course. And it just cut through that whole identification, because I love Ram Dass. Of course, I love my husband too, still. But in that moment,
what's a husband?
Oh, a husband is a former husband.
It sounds like that, but I've never heard it before.
Well, I learned that expression and I loved it and adopted it because I never really stopped loving him, and I still haven't. And I didn't like the expression ex-husband, like you're just crossing that person out of your life.
What do you do with wife, though? What do you do with wife?
I don't know.
Wife
that's your
isn't good.
That's your koan, Raghu.
It sure is.
I don't know. And I would go on and on. At that time, I was responsible for just about everything at InsightLA, having started this meditation center. And I would go through so many difficulties, because my training was a psychotherapist and a meditation teacher and not a manager. I'm terrible at that. Not how to build an organization. And so there were lots of struggles for me personally. And he would listen patiently, and then I would wait for the words of wisdom to arrive. And he said, "Oh, that's attachment." After I had laid out the whole situation and was really expecting some kind of wise solution, that's attachment. Again, that capacity to just cut right through to the heart of the matter, which is ability to let go and let be. And so I loved those personal retreats, but I also would visit him with Jack, and then we got together and we got to be friends. And the more that I became friends with Ram Dass, the more the personal retreats would also turn into just being together, having meals together and spending lots of time together. And I think I was able to make Ram Dass laugh a lot. He liked to laugh, and I do too. And that was a big thing, I think, in our relationship. And also, I loved Dasima, who was serving him so devotedly. And Dasi and I would go swimming at dawn at Baldwin Beach. Even when I was on retreat, that would be part of my practice. We would just go swim at dawn, and she had to be back always by 8:00 to help Ram Dass get up and get ready for the day. And just day in, day out, day in, day out. the way that she served and took care of him, I just fell in love with Dasi as well as Ram Dass. And I watched their relationship evolve, because when I first arrived on the scene, it was a little bit, not gnarly exactly, but Ram Dass resented Dasima trying to take care of him and tell him what to eat and don't eat this and, all that. She was trying to take care of his health and respond to what his doctors wanted her to do. And for him, it was like his mom, and he was resisting her. And if he said something grumpy to her, she would be just devastated the rest of the day. It was like that. And over the years, I just watched their relationship become so much more mellow. For one thing, he could be as grumpy as he wanted. Dasi was secure in her love and his love. And it just didn't faze her. And the less that she was fazed and reactive, the more that he was able to express his love and trust for her. And I mean,
good
it got
example
to the point,
right there for sure.
Yes.
In general, huh?
And for all of us, right?
Yeah.
And it got to the point, I remember when she had to go to California to have surgery on her knees. And I said to Ram Dass, like, what if something happened to her in the surgery? So why don't you just marry her? It was not a sexual or romantic relationship. It was just like, why don't you just do that for medical purposes or. And he said, I've already asked her. And it was just like, oh my gosh, always a step ahead. And I'll just finish with the Ram Dass and Dasi part by saying that during my last solo visit with him, which was toward the end of the last year of his life, I told him how I felt about watching her evolve over the years and the intensity of the seva, of the service that she was selflessly and constantly doing, and the harmony that she would create in the household, which was challenging. Often she was the only female in the household with the male helpers, and managing all of that and everything that went into his care and the maintenance of the household, and doing it, organizing the kirtans, being counselor to countless people who would come through the house and talk to her, and sometimes talk to her about their relationship with Ram Dass too. I said to him, she really is the Ma. I really feel her practice has unfolded in the most profound way. I think you should give her some kind of Dharma transmission before you pass away. And so we did that. We went out onto the balcony outside of his upstairs room. We, made this beautiful table and a little altar. And Dasi was so shy. She didn't even want to do it. But we did it. And he gave her the darshan. And
really? I never knew this. Oh.
Well, of course, Dasima is too humble. She would never tell you this. That's why I'm telling you this, so that this story exists and is recorded. And then I took a photograph, which, of course, I can't find right now, but I lose stuff all the time. I have to find that photograph. But that did happen toward the end. So that was another kind of transmission, really, is watching their relationship. And by the end, by the last visit, by the last couple of visits when I was there, Dasi she had softened so much, and he had opened his heart so much to her that they would just do that, looking at each other with so much love. And it was inspiring, and it was beautiful. And I mean, look, I became part of the household. I would go to doctor's appointments with him. I would, when he was in the hospital in March of 2019, I guess it was, he was in the hospital for
February, March.
A couple times. Right. But then I think he had to go back again in March. I thought it was March. Yeah. And we had come, and he was actually in the hospital pretty much the whole week that we were there. And I remember feeding him, having the opportunity to feed him. He let me feed him his food in the hospital. And Dr. Raj was there. And I think he even let Dr. Raj feed him some. And again, witnessing that total surrender that Ram Dass himself talked about, that, you know, he liked to be the giver and the one in the of course, in the strong power seat. It's a role that felt very natural to him. But when he had his stroke and had to receive so much care and was so helpless in so many ways, I don't know how he did it, but he perfected the art of surrender so that one always felt that he was present in his complete dignity and the majesty of his being and his heart. And yet he could let you feed him without there being a trace. This was a moment of becoming nobody, nobody who would object, nobody who was trying to pretend they were not in the situation they were in. No pretense, just pure, clear, loving, surrendered presence. And I remember once, it was during one of the retreats that I did with him, and we meditated together. And afterwards, I was so curious. I said, what do you do when you meditate? Like, what are you actually doing when you meditate? And he said, I take Maharaji's blanket. That's, you know, his guru. I take Maharaji's blanket and I just enfold the entire world in that blanket. And then, you know, he would widen that embrace of the blanket and basically enfold the whole universe in that blanket. And I just loved hearing him speak about these things. I just fell 100% in love with him. And, you know, I mean, he would let me massage his feet. He would also let me totally snuggle him. Like, he loved to snuggle and he loved to kiss me and I loved to kiss him. Again, nothing romantic or sexual, just, you know, just closeness and love. And speaking of love, he married Jack and me, as you know. We got married in the garden behind the house. And he was so happy. You know, wherever there was love, Ram Dass just liked to bask in it, right? And he was really, really happy for us. And we have beautiful photographs of him and of that day. And I think his favorite part of the ceremony was, you know, at some point the officiant asks the couple who are getting married, do you take this person for, you know, in sickness and health and for this lifetime, basically? And I got so enthusiastic that when he asked me that, I just looked at Jack, who I adored, and I said, I still do. And I still feel this way. And I said, how about lifetime after lifetime? And Ram Dass started laughing and Jack turned pale. He said, one lifetime at a time, okay?
That's great. I love that.
You know, anyway, it was wonderful. I loved teaching with Ram Dass. At first, the first time I taught in front of him, I was super intimidated because not because he was judgmental, although he could be, but that was certainly a capacity that he had, but not because of that, but because I never, I've always had to struggle with confidence and fear in the teaching seat. And so whenever I'm in a new situation, that comes up and I need to move through it. And Ram Dass made a point of sitting right up in front and really listening. He was curious, and afterwards he was so affirming and generous and complimentary that after that, I loved teaching with and in front of him. I mean, we didn't teach on the stage together, but, at the retreats where he would be listening. I'm trying to remember. Oh, another thing that stands out in my mind is one night after dinner, it was just a beautiful night, the way it can be on Maui. There were so many stars, and I said, let's go swimming. And he just, picked it up right away. Yes, let's go swimming. And it's kind of a deal to get Ram Dass ready to go into the pool, and he, needs help, of course, getting his swim stuff on and then getting in the pool. But it all happened, and it was a starry night. And it was Dasi and Ram Dass and me. And I can't remember which super monkey was in the pool with us. And Ram Dass floated on, we took turns. There were a few of them floating on those. They're kind of like blown up mattresses that you can float on in a pool. And we all just floated and looked at the stars. And it was completely blissful and ecstatic. And during, I think it was the second to the last visit, we had dinner, all of us, and in the household. And after dinner, I asked Ram Dass if I could, just take him for a walk, because it was, again, a beautiful starry night. I think there was a full moon or something. And I could push his wheelchair outside once we got help getting outside, and we were walking, and I said, I can't really remember, to be honest, in this moment, if I said it or if he said it. But he said, let's go swimming. And I was like, yes, let's get in the pool and look at the stars. And the problem was, at that point, he had a port, which is like an open place where medicine can go directly into his veins. And so we couldn't actually do that. But just even, he wasn't well, he hadn't been well, but that sparkle and that just kind of quality of being up for anything, I love that about Ram Dass. And I guess the other thing that happened at the last visit when we were there together, it wasn't the retreat. That was the official last visit. It was the one before, when he was still able to talk a bit more. And Jack is such, I guess, a cheerleader for me. He's always encouraging me. And I had been doing some writing. I'm still doing that writing. And he said, why don't you read Ram Dass, something you've written? And I thought I had gotten over that self-consciousness, right? No, it all bubbled up to the surface. And I was like, no, I'd really rather not. But everybody, it seems like, oh yeah, please, please. So I read a couple of the short pieces that I had written. See, I even gulp. My mouth gets dry just remembering that moment. I got over myself, became enough. There was enough nobody there to be able to do it. But the somebody was, right there too. And Ram Dass, he listened. And at the end, he said, this is beautiful. And that's really all he said. But I wrote it down. I was sure I would somehow manage to forget. But, he meant so much to me. And even though he has passed away, I still feel so close to him at times, as I'm sure you do too, Raghu. I turn to him in my meditation sometimes, if I feel I need inspiration, because his light and his love are still here for us. And whatever we may believe about what happens to souls, Ram Dass used to tell us that he was going to soul land. Whatever we may believe about what happens to souls, he's in our hearts very powerfully. And I think the other gift that I felt he gave me, and really gave to all of us equally, is his being 100% himself at all times. He just didn't fake it. And he was very self-disclosing about his own struggles, especially if he felt that there was some idealization coming towards him. He would want to cut right through that. And I, unlike you and unlike, those of you part of the Guru Bhai who were around Maharaji and many people since, my primary connection was not to Maharaji, it's to Ram Dass, to the worm, that juicy worm that I love. And even though I have had an experience of darshan with Maharaji, just mystically once in a meditation retreat. Well, actually, it's a quick story. I'll tell you.
Yeah, no,
I was sitting a meditation retreat at IMS, the Insight Meditation Society in Barre, and it was a few weeks in. So that's day and night.
But when was this? Before Ram Dass in your closest?
Oh yeah, this was before I met Ram Dass.
So you weren't down with Ram Dass in the sense of what he represented. So this is right?
No, Ram Dass was not on my radar, to be honest, and neither was Maharaji.
Yeah, right.
He wasn't, and that. I mean, I had read Be Here Now and been very affected by it, like everybody, but no, he wasn't on my radar. And I liked to meditate outside, and even in New England. So I remember because it was snowy, and I walked down to the beaver pond, which actually I don't think even exists anymore. And I was in my parka, and I had brought blankets, and I was sitting cross-legged on this wooden bench facing the pond, just meditating in the cold. And I wasn't cold. I was just sitting. And suddenly I heard this really loud sound of kirtan. Again, harmonium, kirtan, they're pretty and I liked them, but they didn't have spiritual significance for me, just pretty songs. But there was nobody around. And there was a van parked I could see it down the road. But it was too far away. I thought, well, why would they have their doors open blasting kirtan? And anyway, it was too far away and the music was too loud. And I don't know what made me, but I remember I looked up and there was Maharaji in the sky and he was laughing. And I thought, oh, I think I've slipped into Sharon's mind stream somehow. Like there was no way I could understand why he appeared. And it was just a joyful moment of the music and the laughter, and then boom, it vanished. And I remember I think I told Sharon about it when it was my turn to speak to a teacher in the retreat. And because, Sharon really was very close to Ram Dass all those years and had, a spiritual connection to Maharaji. So who knows, did I slip into her mind stream or did he slip into mine? Or is there any sameness or difference there? These are the kinds of beautiful.
What did Sharon say when you said?
I don't remember her saying much of anything. I think she just sort of smiled. It was a meditation retreat. We were deep in. She wasn't going to chat with me in that context. Right. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, I don't remember her saying too much of anything actually, but Ram Dass liked that story when I told him. I can't remember what I had even forgotten about it. And then I thought, oh, you know what? I did have some connection once, and that was it. Yeah. And that was it, really. when I started going to the retreats, teaching there and chanting, doing kirtan with Krishna Das, and that never happened again. I had Ram Dass. So, yeah.
Well, the first moment that you probably have heard this before because I say it at the retreats or I tell the story at the retreats, but the first moment of that which you're talking about, of complete contact with Ram Dass, 2 feet away and being enveloped in the way that I was, and the trust and the open-heartedness and non-conditionality in the moment, it happened from that moment all the way to the last moment, which was maybe 10 days. I left 10 days before he left last year.
Yes, that's when we left.
House, yeah. And he looked at me and we he's exactly the same from beginning to end. There was never any change. And it was, of course, only when and Maharaji made fun of it too, when I saw for the first second when Neem Karoli Baba came out these doors and we're all waiting for, it was me and Krishnadas and Ramesh and a couple other people, Anasuya, who you know, I believe.
Yeah.
And one of the first thoughts, aside from what everybody says, home, oh my God, okay, I'm home. Aside from that was, oh shit, that's what Ram Dass was all about. It was one of the thoughts that I never forget. And then he used to jive me, Maharaji, and say, is Ram Dass your guru? Well, I loved Ram Dass so much. And I
loved him so much too. And I also have to say, I also enjoyed being around you and Ramesh and, the people who really were around Maharaji and the old timers around Ram Dass, the lifers around Ram Dass.
Yeah, lifers. Oh,
yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, here's something, and you can reflect off this because you are talking about, I was a Zen student, a Buddhist. I was not into love and light. Trungpa used to, talking about the McClellans, I don't know, you might have even been there with Jack. I can't remember. I don't even know if you knew Jack back then, but.
I did. I've known Jack since the second retreat he ever taught. I've known Jack.
Oh, really?
I've known Jack, since we were in our 20s. Oh. And Trungpa had a center just up the street from the McClellan's house. That was the first Dharmadhatu. That was the first center that he started on Upland, and I think it was Upland and Washington, but it was right around the corner.
Yeah. Well, he, of course, used to refer to Ram Dass and us as the love and lighters. We used to go down from my father had a farm in Quebec, and it was a couple of hours drive to Tail of the Tiger, which what Trungpa's place was called at that time. And mercilessly, he would jive us about that love and light stuff. So, of course, it made sense within the context of a sophisticated Buddhist person, shall we say. And I'm saying that for effect, but only for effect.
I know, but really, Raghu, here's the crazy part, which is that when you do intensive practice, whether it's Zazen, I don't care if it's Tibetan Buddhism or Zen Buddhism or really any of the Buddhist practices, when you immerse yourself and you do intensive practice, what happens? Your heart opens and fills with love, and you realize there is love in the universe. And what else happens? At times, things become very luminous. And so it's just that there's, I don't know, it's almost like a kind of hesitation to name it. Like, I don't know why. I don't know. And I don't know, I'm not really immersed in those communities so much anymore. Maybe it's kind of like in Western psychotherapy. For so many years, you couldn't use the word love. It was too had too many connotations that talk about mushy and squishy. I mean, it just had too many of those connotations. And but that's all changed, and I'm sure today, you know, if some of the Buddhist teachers of back then were alive, they wouldn't be saying those things that they said back then.
We could start a whole new thing, the mushy squishy group. Right. We could trademark it and get an Instagram thing.
Maybe we'll call it that.
Yeah, right. Mushy.
No, you are. You're good at. Keeping love, serve, remember going, keeping the teachings coming out regularly. You know, doing events and stuff. You're still doing all that, Raghu, and you are good at it.
Yeah, thank you, Trudy.
Yeah.
Oh, so what?
We were hoping that we could have a retreat. We were so hoping we could have one more retreat this year, just to honor Ram Dass. You know. Anyway,
I just talked to Jack about it because he wondered what was possibly going to happen in a year in December of 2021. And we're heading there and looking like, okay, we're going to say the right prayers and do the right thing and see what the universe speaks to us. But I said, we're all set to do it. So, and everybody, So what I wanted to mention and get kind of, it'll turn around to you, because there's some similarities, although Roshi Joan Halifax knew Ram Dass they were very close forever, right?
Yeah, no, she was there a lot when we were there.
Yeah, and she was, from the earliest years. Mm-hmm. So I was doing a podcast with her and Duncan, I think, and I said, you've been hanging out with Ram Dass all these years. And the reference of Maharaji is ever present, and you're a Zen person and so on. What does he mean to you, or what have you ever picked up, or being around Ram Dass related to Neem Karoli Baba? So she said, this was so great. She said, when I look at his picture, he's just empty.
Yeah.
Empty. We, interestingly enough, and that's all of our experience. That was the real nobody that we ever met, because there was no subjective, self-referential anything going on. We knew that, but one day, Ram Dass was doing a little seminar at the house, and actually Roshi was part of it. And somehow they asked him, so what did you really feel when you were with Neem Karoli Baba Maharaji? And he just started to talk for a minute, and some of the things that everybody's heard before, the usual around the kind of unconditional love that he got, and everything with his family, everything with his career and friends and everything. That was all conditional. So that was the first time, and how he used to talk about that. But then, all of a sudden, he kind of looked back up and he went, he was so empty. And he repeated it over and over and got into that feeling, bhav, that spiritual feeling of being in that moment, that ever-present moment. The moment he met him that first time, the moments he shared with everyone, the moments you're talking about, the moments I'm talking about, that ever-present, full moment, empty, love, empty, whatever it's like you said. There's the, what is, Bob Thurman calls emptiness the womb of bliss or something. He has this neat little aphorism around it. And so even though she, they always had this jive going on around, he'd look and he'd say soul, and he'd look at her and he'd go, sorry about that, or something like that. He'd do it with all of the Buddhist friends of ours. It was a standing joke. But she obviously, there was a connection there to what is represented by Ram Dass with everybody. Everything that you're talking about, and your whole relationship, and the way he was as in this particular incarnation. I mean, it's all referential for me, coming from Neem Karoli Baba. So when she said that, it was my experience, so you obviously described that one experience, which, the vastness of whatever this thing is. But does that
and it was
resound
joyful
at all with you in your
it
own
was
experience?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, that I don't know, darshan, whatever you would call it, of the kirtan, the music, him appearing in the sky, whatever that was, I felt it was very joyful. Not and again, you could say empty joy, because it wasn't attached to any personal feeling or flavor.
Yeah.
It was just joy. And when I was in the house and at the retreats and, seeing the gigantic pictures of Maharaji. And for those of you who haven't been in Ram Dass's house, there's just pictures of Maharaji everywhere, on the wall, on the dining room table, in the kitchen. I mean, everywhere. And he became, I don't know, it was just part of the air that you breathed in that household. And I did think of, I guess that, I think it was Nisargadatta who said, love tells me I'm everything. Wisdom tells me I'm nothing. And between those two, my life flows. I think when I reflect on Maharaji, or when I was at the temple in Taos, which I visited, and I love that Hanuman statue in Taos. That is the phrase that comes to mind. The love, I experienced his joy, but I didn't feel any personal love the way you might have felt in a, physical presence of Maharaji at the beginning. But I felt the love in everybody around. That Maharaji was almost like pulling the love out, just like new teaching situations would pull out my fear. I feel like Maharaji was drawing, just pulling the love out of everybody. So that it wasn't a direct connection to him, but it was his reflection in everybody in the household and all the people in the retreats and the mala ceremonies at the end of the retreat, when everybody would just be melting into tears because that wave of blessing, Jinji Lap, we call it in the Tibetan tradition, that wave of blessing was just so palpable and strong from Ram Dass. So the love, and then the nothing part, when I would look, I would try to stare at the eyes of Maharaji and see if something would happen, because everybody else was so into him. And I really, like I said, I was into Ram Dass. So sometimes I would just stare at the eyes, and it was like staring into the eyes of some of my early Zen master teachers, where there was this very penetrating clarity, but it was kind of fathomlessly deep. And that makes it empty, because when you're in yourself with all of your self-concerns that we normally have, that are just part of life, that's not what the eyes look like. That's not what the gaze looks like.
Right. But Trudy, the reality of your expression of Ram Dass's love, which has been so full and joyful and so connective. I don't think we've ever even had this kind of conversation. We've talked a lot, but we've never talked about what you're expressing, this experience with Ram Dass, that he was able to just be in this moment, as he used to call it, with everybody, all the way extended to 400 people in one place in one time or more. And that creation really, as I say, when I first met Neem Karoli Baba, I went, that's what Ram Dass was all about. It was a complete through line. A complete through line. So, and that's beautiful. That's, the man in the blanket that we knew, or whatever that thing is beyond that corporal, relative experience, who knows, right? But it certainly comes from that one place, which is, we don't have any good words, the love and unconditional love and bliss and emptiness. We have, it's probably a nice mix of all that. The reality is that we were fortunate to be with it.
We were really fortunate to be with him. And, the experience is wordless and it's beyond words. And so we look for words that capture a piece of it, some dimension of it, but it that the words are pointing to is just, so much bigger than any word. And I, you mentioned that we hadn't ever talked this way and you didn't really know these things about my relationship with him. And I think sometimes somebody does have to pass away for us to have these kinds of conversations, which are, to me, the healthiest form of grieving, the healthiest form of expressing the loss of his physical being. I haven't been back to the house because of the pandemic. No, that's not true. I went back to the house and stayed there actually in February when we had the memorial on Maui.
Yes, right. That's right.
I forgot.
Yeah.
I did stay there. But being at that time, the house felt still very full of his presence. It didn't really feel like an absence yet. But then it felt more like an absence, especially the last few days when we would have been having the retreat. And having these kinds of conversations, Raghu, and being able to remember together and just share the love, to me, that is, it's a tribute to Ram Dass. It's a tribute to the power of the love that we have felt in our hearts. And it's also, I think, the most, the word that came into my mind again, it was sort of like magnificent way to grieve somebody we love.
That's so great. As you can hear, my doggy
I can see your doggy.
Doggy wants to do something else. We're doing a podcast, Maya. I was going to say that there's one, because we got to show people his experience in Maui. And so we've been taking, it's called Moments of Joy and Wisdom, Ram Dass in Maui. And we've been finding different little things of him. And so there's this one footage of the last Mala ceremony. And they had a piece of footage because we were talking about Ram Dass is with us. I mean, Ram Dass is so every day, that's all I'm doing. And, I'm passing stuff through my head about, gee, what's the boss going to say now about this? Or should we do this? Should we do that? But this footage is Ram Dass. I went up and I'm pranaming, and this is Ram Dass. He goes like this. They've got it. I have that in my head now on a day-to-day basis. It's similar to Neem Karoli Baba used to watch out, buddy. And this is what I have with me now, always. So,
beautiful.
Ram Dass.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
You really are immersed every day. That's wonderful.
Yeah, no, fortunate.
Yeah.
Really fortunate. Thanks so much for being here, Trudy. It's so great.
Thank you. I'm glad we finally got a time to do this.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Really, it's a pleasure. Thank you for, thank you for asking.
Oh, absolutely. I'm, as you just said, what a tremendous opportunity that I have not heard your story. And we were there a lot together with him.
I know, a lot.
So it's really sweet to get the story. And by the way, and one of the reasons we haven't been able to get together as quickly as we wanted is because you've been writing a book. Can I ask, do you have a name for the book? Or
I don't have a name for the book. I have 3 possibilities for the title for the book. But what the book is really some stories from my life. I was blessed to have some amazing teachers, some stories of, my time with teachers that meant a lot to me, but also some of the stories from my growing up that I really would love for my my grandchildren, and maybe all grandchildren, but certainly my grandchildren, their interest. Well, we have the little one who's just turned 2, but my the older ones are 16 and 19, and their level of interest in my life right now probably hovers somewhere around 0. But someday that will change. I don't know about you, but I wish my parents had left stories of their lives and how they got to be who they were. And
actually, my mom did. She wrote a book.
Really?
Yeah, it's fantastic.
That's unusual.
Too. Yeah.
Yeah, that is fantastic.
Yeah.
So it's very simple, really. I just wanted to tell some stories of my life that I thought, I mean, I've actually, look, like every life, there's been plenty of tragedy in my life. You know, my first husband committed suicide. You know, I mean, there've been plenty of tragic things, but basically, I feel I've been blessed to have had a pretty fun and happy life in the midst of it all. And I'd like to be able to just share that and say, look how much fun this was. And this really wasn't, but look what I learned from it. Yeah, you know, just simple things like that.
That's great.
Yeah.
Oh, so great. We'll see it next year. Of course, we'll be doing a podcast and sharing it with people. So
thank you.
All the best of luck with it. Again, thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care of yourself.
You too. See you next.
Stay safe.
See you soon in person, God willing.
I hope so.
I mean, we live, you know, not that far apart, you know. So.
I know. Well, when I go back to LA.
Yeah, we'll see.
We're not that far apart.
Yeah, we'll see.
Hopefully.
Next time.
Thank you. Okay, honey.
Love you.
Love you too.